Hello and welcome, everyone. We're really glad to have you here today for the next and the last, actually, in this iteration of our Day One and Beyond series, this time diving into database. For those of you that might be new to these events, we're hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for end users. And I'll be sharing some resources for you that will lead you back to those forums. So if you're not already a member, we invite you to join up, create a free account. You can look for other upcoming events on all kinds of topics. You can post discussion questions and have some community with other Oracle users in there as well. My name is Kenna Kettrick. I'm a program manager with the OCI go-to-market team. And today I'm joined by our usual crew of Kumar and Alarie, both cloud engineers here at Oracle. And today's special guest, Eugenio Galiano, who is a senior principal product manager for this focus on database quick start on OCI.
Thank you so much, Kenna. So thanks everyone for participating in these polls. So today, like Kenna mentioned, is going to be our last session in this iteration, and we will be talking about our Oracle Cloud Database Services Quick Start. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So if you guys haven't attended any of the previous Day One and Beyond sessions, my name is Kumar. I'm a staff cloud engineer on the customer enablement team, and I'll go ahead and let my colleague Brandon introduce himself, as well as our guest Eugenio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Alarie. I'm also a cloud engineer here on the Oracle Customer Enablement team, and it's a pleasure to be back with all of you today.
And hello, I'm Eugenio Galiano. I'm a senior principal product manager in the database group. So I'll be doing a demo and be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. So to get started, we want to go through a quick agenda right now. So first, we'll be talking about our overview of just our Oracle Cloud and Database services. And then we'll talk specifically about 3 of the services in particular: our Autonomous Database Service, Exadata Cloud Service, as well as our DBCS Database Cloud Service. And then we'll have a quick discussion again on high availability, backup strategies, disaster recovery. And then we'll let Eugenio hop into the OCI console and give us a quick demonstration of our database services. So just to get started, I'm sure you guys have seen this slide again if you have attended any of the previous Day One and Beyond sessions. This is just an overview slide of our Oracle Cloud service offerings. So again, you can see on the right-hand side, we have more of the governance and administration aspects, our PaaS and SaaS offerings up at the top under applications and analytics. And then you can see kind of in the middle layer, we have databases, which is really what we'll be focusing on today. So our autonomous databases, DBCS, Exadata, that is all encompassed there. And, in previous sessions, we've gone through things like networking, our core infrastructure, as well as in our operations. Day One and Beyond session, we touched on the developer services. So things like infrastructure of code, Terraform, things like that. So first, to get started on our Oracle Cloud Database Services, so we kind of have this great little graphic talking about the different ones that we'll be discussing today. So on the left-hand side, you can see our DBCS, most versatile, Exadata, highly differentiated, and then Autonomous Database, leading edge, cloud native. So just talking about it as a whole, your different subscriptions are going to range across the spectrum of, your service editions, as well as automation levels to meet whatever SLAs you're looking at. So depending on which SLAs you have or kind of what workloads you're running or your business needs, you'll be able to choose one of these different services, or a variety of other services as well. And so you can kind of see as well, too, as we progress from left-hand to right, automation as well kind of takes over. And you can see towards the right-hand side under autonomous, we kind of can consider that a actual PaaS service where it's a lot more managed on Oracle's end, taking a lot of the work off of, your DBAs and people who are normally managing that database software. So let's talk a little bit about some of the services from like a business value perspective, looking at the different subscriptions. So you can kind of see here, we also have a few different points about the business value of using Oracle database services. So whether that be the choice of deployment, our converged architecture, autonomous operations. And Eugenio, let me bring you in now. What do we mean when we're talking about on this left-hand side, it says single database for all data or something like built-in integrations? What are we talking about when we're saying, a single database for all? Do you think you could explain that?
Yeah, thank you. So basically what we mean is, the Oracle philosophy for our database has always been to manage any kind of data and process any kind of workload that a customer may need for their business, right? So if you have data that's in, traditional text data or just plain old columns and rows, right? We've been doing that for a long time. Of course, the sources of data this day and age have really migrated substantially. They went through different versions, right? XML was very popular for a while. Highly, Excel spreadsheets were popular for a while. Text, the format text was popular for a while. This day and age, almost all the data that gets created on internet or digital sources is in JSON format. So what this means is, hey, there's different kinds of data that need to be processed in my data management system. I can either do one or two things. I can either go find a database that processes and uses that kind of data and does that kind of workload, or I can just use one database that does it all. And that's what we do with Oracle. So we keep evolving the database to be able to use any new kind of data type that becomes popular, as well as any new kind of analytics or data management processing that needs to be done, right? So in the old days, very clear, it was just either OLTP or data warehouse. This day and age, that distinction no longer exists, right? We have data lakes, we have real-time processing, we have a combination of reporting with multi real-time updates. So the workloads have evolved also. And again, the Oracle database has evolved along with those workload requirements to be able to process that kind of data and those kind of workloads in one single database. So the important thing is store the data once, use it as many different ways as you need to use it to get your work done, to run your business, rather than having to store the data multiple times on different databases.
Yeah.
So that's the concept. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That makes total sense, kind of as technology in general is evolving, different applications are doing different things. And so it's kind of good to know that as your workload is being evolved, like Oracle's kind of keeping up with that as well too. Like our database software is evolving as well to be able to handle these different type of workloads and different types of data, right?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. So now we can kind of jump in, I think, a little bit to the autonomous database. So we call this cloud native. So I'll let Brandon kind of talk about, what cloud native means, and we can continue this discussion a little bit more about autonomous.
Yep. Thanks, Uma. So we have our Oracle Autonomous Database, and this is really, Oracle's leading edge like database software. It has built-in like machine learning driven automated tuning, scaling, and patching. And it also delivers the highest level of performance, availability, and security for your different workloads. This is like a fully automated database service that's going to make it really easy for all organizations to develop and deploy application workloads, regardless of the complexity or scale of them. So, with this choice of deployment, or with this specific software, you do have the choice to deploy on shared infrastructure or dedicated infrastructure. I think we will talk about that a little bit more later. But, we're going to get into some of the cool different features and workload types of the autonomous database within the next few slides here. All right, so when you choose to deploy the autonomous database within Oracle Cloud, you're going to have to choose your workload type. So we have our transaction processing workload type, and this is really optimized for transactional workloads or mixed workloads. And the database is optimized to read and write within row format. And then with the data warehouse workload, this is going to be optimized to read and write within columnar format. So it's really fast when you're querying like large amounts of data. And then we also have our JSON database and our Oracle Apex or application development workload type as well. So a little bit about Oracle Apex. This is a low code application development tool that you can use, and you can transform your spreadsheets into applications very fast, or create custom applications without writing any code. And then on the right hand side, we also do have the features of Oracle Graph and Oracle Spatial. So with Oracle Spatial, this is included within our autonomous database, and it allows developers and analysts to get started easily with location intelligence analytics and mapping services. And then with our Oracle Graph, this will enable you to create graphs from data within the autonomous database. And then with these graphs, you can analyze your data based upon connections and relationships between the different data entities. All right, so Eugenio, do you want to talk to us a little bit about cloud native development?
Yeah, sure. So actually in the next few slides, I want to go over what the difference between a cloud native database and traditional databases. I'm going to assume that maybe several of you that are attending already have Oracle databases. Maybe you have an Oracle database on premise in your data centers, or have developed in the past. So when we talk about cloud native database, what do we mean? It means you're basically looking to deploy a new application that will be that's going to live in the cloud. It's going to be developed in the cloud, live in the cloud, and mostly it's as an outward bound application, right? So people will be connecting to that application from external sources, and you're going to be processing the data and using the data whichever way you want to. So the first thing, of course, if you're going to develop a cloud native application, is we need to provide you with the tools, right? Because one of the things that cloud did for everybody is make it very easy to go find your favorite tool or set of tools to develop applications without having to worry about what your IT department installed inside of your firewall in your own data center and restrict you to that. And of course, open source is really the go-to place to find cloud native development tools and to develop applications. So what hasn't changed is, even though you're deploying and developing a database application in the cloud, you still need to do several things that are basic to database applications. For example, you need to model the data. If you're going to create a warehouse, or if you're going to create an OTP application, you need to model the data. What's going to be my primary keys? What tables am I going to have? What are the entities in the table? So we, in the autonomous database, we included a native data modeling tool. That's included in there. If you want to develop your application in SQL, maybe you're familiar with SQL Developer. We have a suite of products called SQL Developer, which comes free with the database. We integrated that into the autonomous database. So when you're running and creating an application with autonomous database, and you'll see me demo all of this shortly here. SQL Developer is built into as a tool. You don't have to install it externally or as a third-party tool. You can put it in there. A lot of the database applications that are being developed in the cloud, if not all, need to be accessed effectively as a web browser endpoint. You want to access that application from your web browser. You want to access that application from your mobile device, right? So we integrate into the autonomous database what's called ORDS. So these are endpoints to the database that allow you to see that database effectively as a web application. Right. So again, you run the database, it really just looks like a backend store that you can easily access through cloud native communication protocols. Brandon mentioned Apex. Apex is our low code development platform. If you don't know SQL and you don't want to worry about SQL, you just want to effectively develop an application mostly from drag and drop, a cloud native application, you can use Apex to do that. Things that are always involved with databases are bringing data in, cleaning data when you put it in, and then maintaining the data. So if you're familiar with our Oracle Data Integrator suite of products, that's integrated into autonomous database, right? So you don't have to get an Informatica system. You don't have to bring, any other kind of data integration and movement application. We have an integrated product into Autonomous Database that's free. And when I mention all these things, they're included in the system and in the price you pay for the system, right? So you subscribe to this model, and in the cloud model, you get everything as you subscribe and use it. If you're doing CI/CD development, we have a new actually interface called SQL CL. So if you've been using SQL Plus in the past, or just SQL to connect to the database, we have a much more modern, thin client way to connect and develop with the database called SQL CL. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go look at it, Google it, SQL CL. It also, for example, has integrated what's called document store functionality. If you're a MongoDB developer and you're developing in CRUD language, with SQL CL, you can do the same thing. You can do JSON manipulation with CRUD commands in there without having to ever write a piece of SQL code. So look into that if you're interested. Automated data analytics is in there. As Madam mentioned, there is a complete there's an ML engine built into Autonomous Database that not only can you use to develop your own ML applications, but that we also use to auto-tune the database and make sure the database is running as efficiently as possible. So we use it for multiple purposes in the Autonomous Database. And then other traditional functionality that's in the database: auto-indexing, auto-partitioning, and auto-scaling. One of the biggest issues that as DBAs and maintainers of database systems we have to deal with is, my system's running out of capacity. How can I better run my queries? By putting more indexes. All of that is automated in the Autonomous Database. So, and by the way, it's done by, I just mentioned the ML engine, the auto ML engine. That's how we do it, right? We're looking at how you're using your database, and we will automatically create an index for you. Or we will automatically scale the system from 2 to 4 CPUs if we see that there's too much workload coming in and the existing number of CPUs allocated to it can't be used. Okay. And partitioning, again, I mentioned that, but partitioning has been around for a long time. We have an auto partitioning mechanism in there to determine which partitioning type to use most effectively for your application. So cloud native. Don't worry about the database and what the database has to do to perform correctly. We give you a whole bunch of tools that you can use to develop your application. On the back end, we make sure that your application is as efficient as possible. So the next. So once you develop the application and you put it into production, you want to make sure that that application is mission critical, right? And so this is, again, is built into Autonomous Database. It's built on technologies that we've had for a long time: real application clusters, the Exadata database platform on the back end, in memory, Oracle in memory, sharding. If you're an existing Oracle user and you're using the database on premise and your data centers, you may be familiar with these technologies because you may have implemented some of them to solve some problems. In our Autonomous Database cloud offering, we include them all for you there. And we, not only do we use it to make the system most efficient, but we give you access to it also so that you can use it yourself in your applications. We include Data Guard. We'll talk a little bit more about Data Guard a little later, but if you want to do high availability and disaster recovery, we can do that across data centers. It's automatically done and built into Autonomous Database. I'm going to show you that. Backups included in there. You don't have to worry about backups. The system automatically does a incremental backup every day, and you can do a point-in-time recovery at any time, at any day of the week with Autonomous Database. We have an offering called Data Safe. Actually, we have security in the next slide, so we'll leave that. And then patching, auto problem resolution. So our Autonomous Database and our cloud operations are constantly monitoring these environments. If there's a patch that came out for some security vulnerability, we'll automatically apply that patch to the system, right? If there are some issues that are causing performance problems, we will automatically log a ticket and monitor those instances. So automation is built into the system, and also problem resolution. So you don't, as a user, you don't have to worry about doing any of that, opening SRs with Oracle or anything like that. So mission critical. Once you develop, put it into production, This will offer you the highest level of availability of any of the services we have in the cloud. Next. And certainly not least, because I don't want to say last, if you read any news media any day of the week, you will see massive security breaches every day, right? And so, you know, at Oracle, we have the advantage that our history has always been in managing data. So we understand the importance of data, and more importantly, the importance of you losing your data. So by default, our databases have very high level of security. We automatically encrypt, right? There's no option not to encrypt data on autonomous database. If you look at most of the other databases out there on other cloud services, encryption is just now coming along, and it's always you have to opt in and implement it, which seems very odd for data that is sitting on publicly facing, you know, clouds. But anyhow, we have that. There's many other types of security that we built into the database. For example, we want to make sure that if somebody's snooping around on tables that they're not supposed to be snooping around on, or trying to break in, that we immediately flag those. That's done through the admin risk control, and also through our label security product, which are built into the autonomous database. So we want to be very proactive in determining activities that may not be what they're supposed to be in terms of accessing the data. We also, by the way, have blockchain tables in the database. We're one of the first databases to actually offer blockchain management inside of the database. We have a lot of customers that are developing blockchain applications in combination with our blockchain platform. So if you're familiar with NFTs, with non-fungible tokens, and you know, certainly with crypto, anything crypto, right? You can implement those kind of applications within the autonomous database. So a lot of security built in by default and included in the autonomous service. So mission critical security, very high availability and disaster recovery in the offering, and of course the tools you need for developing a cloud native application. That's the whole goal of autonomous database as an offering for customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much, Eugenio. Before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to take a look at the Q&A, and it seems like we have a couple questions. So somebody asked, how about tools to migrate data from on-premise to cloud, assuming exact objects are to be moved? So I think you touched on that with the data integrator, but is there anything?
Well, no, we actually haven't automated. If you have an Oracle on-premise database and you want to migrate to the cloud, we actually have an automated way to do that. You can look on cloud.oracle, on oracle.com/cloud. You can see the migration utility in there. Also, if you are a SQL developer user on premise, SQL developer has an automatic migration tool to move your database on-prem to your autonomous database. So that's built in there too. So okay, that is key, right? They get our customers to the cloud. So we have a migrated process for that.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was one more about, I think they're mentioning in ADB, what frequency are the archive logs backed up to object storage? Do you know the answer to that?
So we don't back up archive logs, right? We do incremental backups every day. Mm. So that's effectively how we're doing the high availability. So got it. Once a day we do backups. Now, if you're running autonomous data guard, then it's real time, right? I mean, we're to the data guard, and I'll show autonomous data guard when we get on the demo.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And then one more that just popped up was how to diagnose performance issues and what tools
they're built in. I'll show you. Mm-hmm. They're built into autonomous.
Okay, great. So now let's talk a little bit about the different deployment choices. So we have our shared infrastructure as well as our dedicated infrastructure. So kind of quickly going through the difference between the two. Our shared is kind of the simplest experience, we think, for your non-technical users. And it's where Oracle is essentially automating and managing everything for you guys. So deployment, lifecycle, software updates. You're essentially just choosing your database resources like your compute, your storage, and the region. And there's kind of complete elasticity as well within this deployment option. So the minimum size is 1 OCPU and 1 terabyte of storage for your database. There's no fixed size building blocks, and you can scale up and scale down on demand with zero downtime. as well as choose an option to automatically scale online for a true pay-per-use. Excuse me. And then talking about our dedicated infrastructure, you can either choose dedicated infrastructure on our public cloud or a cloud at customer deployment. So this provides your own database cloud running on your dedicated Exadata infrastructure, which we know that Autonomous is built off of that Exadata infrastructure. And it will run all your databases, any size, scale, or criticality. It provides the highest isolation, as well as runs inside the secure isolation zone for your highest protection from other tenants as well. And you are able to configure multiple Exadatas or container database for intra-company isolation, as well as take advantage of the customizable operational policies as well. Is there anything you want to add, Eugenio, to this slide? If not, looks like we have a couple more questions. Maybe we can try answering before we go into Exadata.
We'll talk about why we need, when we talk about Exadata, why we need dedicated infrastructure and so on. So we'll skip that.
Okay. So some of the questions, one was saying, do you know the minimum RPO if there's no data guard?
So there is a defined RPO. I'm going to be guessing because I have to go look at it. It's 99.95, I believe. But it is, you can look on oracle.com/cloud and the SLAs and RPO and RTOs are defined. As a matter of fact, we provide customer guarantees, right, on our service. So if we do not meet these SLAs, then there's compensation. So I'll try and look that up before the end, and I'll try to answer it. But if not, it's definitely in our website.
Mm-hmm. And then one was saying the slide that shows data encryption, data redaction, data masking. Do we have a tool to DID data, say from prod to lower environments?
Yeah, and that's exactly what data masking does. So if you have in your prod environment, you have social security numbers, and you just want to take that data and scramble it to make it look like it's a social security number, but not a valid social security number, that's what data masking does. Mm-hmm. So a DID is a data, exactly. So it creates a syntactically valid equivalent, but not an actual real value.
Got it. And then last one for now is it possible to migrate a set of schemas from OCI BareMetal database to Autonomous database?
Yes. And again, both through the migration process or just with SQL Developer, right? Because SQL Developer, you can pick specific schemas to move from one database to another. And SQL Developer understands, Autonomous database versus, as a matter of fact, if you want to migrate, basically to Autonomous database, you do have to do it through schemas, right? You can't restore from a backup. You migrate schemas effectively.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thanks for answering that. Okay, so now we'll move on to talking about our Exadata database service. So we have in here highly differentiated, and we kind of put that there because, Oracle is different from other cloud providers where we're running our database software specifically on this hardware Exadata that is built to run our software the best. And kind of a great analogy that Eugenio brought up to us beforehand was when you think about Apple, they run iOS specifically on their iPhones, right? They're not using a generic hardware. They're using the hardware that best runs the software that they've created for it. So that's kind of essentially what Oracle has done with Exadata. So that's why we like to describe it as, highly differentiated in that case, is because typically other cloud users are going to be using their generic hardware to run their database software, where Oracle is a bit different in that aspect. And so I'll let Brandon talk a little bit about Exadata Vision, and we'll go a little bit more in depth with the service.
Yep. Thanks, Uma. Yep. So the Oracle Exadata database machine is engineered to deliver dramatically better performance, cost effectiveness, and availability for the different Oracle databases. This includes high performance database servers with scale out intelligent storage servers that include leading edge storage caching technologies and cloud scale RDMA enabled internal network fabric. So some of the key benefits here is that, like Uma mentioned, this is the ideal database hardware to run your Oracle database. And then we also have like automated management that's available. So with Oracle Exadata, it's essentially fully automated and optimized end to end. And some of the key features here is that you can easily add compute or storage servers to meet, size requirements of your different applications. And you can scale by connecting multiple Exadata database machines, different racks, or storage expansion racks. All right, and then these are like many of the different features of the Exadata database platform. Eugenio, is there any particular features that you want to, I guess, elaborate on a little bit?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit about this, right? So hopefully most of you have heard or are using Exadata. So this slide is broken down into two components. On the left are database features. On the right are hardware features that are built into this platform, right? So the Exadata platform, like Brandon said, it was specifically designed to only do one thing, and that is to run the Oracle database. So we match Oracle database features to hardware features that we put into the platform. So for example, if you in memory, right, you want to load your database in memory, you want to run columnar tables, you need a lot of memory for that. You need a lot of fast memory. So we do that specifically with PCI cards on the Exadata platform. Advanced compression, security, and so on. There's very specific feature that we map between the two. And so this is the platform that we actually run our autonomous database on. And of course, we have it as a standalone service in the cloud also. But this really allows us to differentiate our Oracle database service in the cloud to other database services. Let's say you want to run Oracle in the cloud. You go over to Amazon, you run on RDS, right? You can run Oracle on RDS. That's on standard hardware, right? Standard hardware configuration. They don't have any of the features you see on the right here to make sure the Oracle database runs as efficiently as possible. So that's why we call it a very differentiated service, because there is a 4 or 8 to 1 ratio of hardware you need on Exadata versus what the equivalent would be on a third-party platform, right? So approximately for every 2 CPUs of Exadata, you would be looking at least at 8 in a equivalent third-party cloud platform to get the same performance out of your Oracle database. So that there's quite a bit of additional features and benefits to running on Exadata. So.
Awesome, cool. And now we can take a look at the different deployment options. So on the left-hand side, we have, our on-premise deployment option. So you can get one of these Exadata database machines on-premise. This is going to be, purchased outright. It's not a subscription service like some of the other offerings that we have. And this, database machine, if you choose to deploy it on-premise, is going to be, put within your data center, and then also it's going to be managed by you. But then as you kind of step down to the middle section there, we have a hybrid option, and this is our Exadata Cloud at Customer. So you still get that, Exadata database machine on-premise within your data center. It's just going to be fully managed by Oracle, and there's going to be a cloud subscription pricing. So, if you have regulations that prevent you from going to, Exadata within like a public cloud or Exadata, within the cloud, then you can definitely, deploy it on premise and still have that cloud control plane, that's nice to use. And then on the far right-hand side, we have our public cloud deployment option. And this is going to be, the machine's going to be placed within OCI, within one of our data centers. And then it's going to be a cloud subscription, and it's going to be Oracle managed. So the main difference between this deployment option and the Exadata Cloud at Customer is that with Cloud at Customer, you're actually having that Exadata database machine within your data center. And then, we can talk about some of the different reasons that an organization, may not want to move to the public cloud. So, there may be like regulations or policies that require, your data to be local. So one of the other options, aside from public cloud, could come into play there. And then also too, if you wanted to have like a tightly coupled architecture with your on-premise applications, you might prefer to have your Exadata database machine within your data center.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for going through that. So it looks like we had one more question pop up in Q&A, which was how to detect issues on process of running ETL when you're running copy from OLTP to an analytics database.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's a too generic a question, right? So, but in general, Oracle Data Integrator will manage, will manage copies, right? So if, for example, with Exadata Cloud Service and with Autonomous Database, you can ingest data directly into memory now, right? We have connectors that let you read in from a device on the internet and directly into the memory structure of the database without the traditional way of having to store it on disk and then reading into memory. So that's built into the tools, right? If an ingestion fails, if an ingestion dies midway through the process and so on, you flag it and restart it, or you abort it, right? I mean, it's, but there are processes and mechanisms in Oracle Data Integrator to determine how to deal with a failure.
Got it. So thanks for answering that question. Now we'll talk about our DBCS, and we'll kind of breeze through this because I definitely want to make sure there's enough time for Eugenio's demonstration in the console. So this cloud service, we're calling it, the most versatile. So kind of different to the autonomous database, how Eugenio and Brandon were talking about the cloud native aspect of it. When we were building solely an application on cloud, it's developed on cloud, it's living there. This would kind of be an option if you were, let's say, using an older Oracle database, or you already had an application on premise where you were using, let's say 11G or 12C or something like that. An older version, then this would really be the option that you would want to use, which is why we're calling it, most versatile. So let's kind of move to the next. So as an overview of the cloud service, it's, going to provide you the ability to deploy your Oracle databases in the cloud. You can deploy Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition 2, or any database version 11.2 and later. You also have the option to deploy different BareMetal and virtual machine shapes, which are referred to as DB systems in your Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And so with this database cloud service, you're going to be managing the database instance, including provisioning, patching, backup, and disaster recovery using your OCI Cloud automation tools, such as, the OCI console, CLI, or APIs. There's also an SDK that supports a number of different languages as well. And OCPU scaling is available with both BareMetal and virtual machine shapes to meet different workload requirements, as well as storage scaling is available with your VM shapes to meet any kind of growing capacity requirements as well. So talking a little bit about the virtual and BareMetal options. So there's, your maximum number of OCPUs, memories, and storage for your database will depend on the shape that you use. So there's going to be single node and 2-node database systems on virtual machines. A single or 1-node virtual machine database system will consist of just one virtual machine. And then your 2-node VM DB systems consist of 2 virtual machines on separate servers running your real application clusters or rack. And so virtual machine compute shapes come with up to 24 cores and up to 320 gigabytes of memory to support your customers with small and large database processing requirements. When the VMs are clustered together with real application clusters, the OCPU quantity and memory capacity will be doubled. And so since virtual machine database systems will use block volumes, the storage can scale online up to 40 terabytes as well. And then with BareMetal database systems, they consist of 52 OCPUs, 768 gigabytes of memory, and up to 16 terabytes of usable storage. Their BareMetal is not shared and will provide you guys with access to all the resources in the server for a single instance database that require dedicated resources. So since the BareMetal database systems are using NVMe local storage, the storage capacity will not be scalable. Any things that I missed or things you want to mention, Eugenio, about this service?
No, I think that gives a good overview.
Okay, great. So now we'll jump in a little bit to high availability, disaster recovery and backup, and then we can hop into the console.
Yep. So if you look at the visual here, so we do have some different options for backup. So we have our backup to Oracle Cloud Object Storage, and this is going to be the Oracle recommended way to back up your database systems. Some of the advantages with this is that it's highly durable, highly performant, and highly available. You also can back up to local Exadata storage or FRA, and the backups are going to be stored within the FRA or fast recovery area of the database system. Some of the advantages here is that, you know, it's an optimized backup with fast point in time recovery, but there are some disadvantages with, you know, backing up to your local Exadata storage. For instance, if the database system becomes unavailable, the backup is also going to be unavailable. So that's one of the reasons that Oracle, you know, recommends backing up to Oracle Cloud Object Storage. You can also enable automatic backups for your database when the service creates it. So we do have like a weekly level 0 backup that's generated. And this is like the equivalent to a full backup. And then we have our daily level 1 backups. And these are incremental backups created on each day following, you know, the level 0 backup. And we can touch on Active Data Guard here. So this is going to deliver real-time data protection and availability while eliminating compromise inherent to other solutions for the Oracle database. And this is going to enable zero data loss disaster recovery across any distance without impacting database performance. It supports a manual setup for automatic failover if you wanted like a fast start failover. And then it also, the standby will support symmetric or asymmetric configurations that can reside across availability domains and regions. So Eugenio, I guess, is there any, you know, thing that you want to add about Active Data Guard before we kind of hop into the demo portion?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. So if you, for those of you that haven't seen it, I already logged in, but this is basically where you land in when you first log in. So this is the console, the cloud console. And so basically I want to follow the presentation. I'm going to very quickly show you 3 things. The very first slide was, hey, OCI is not just about databases. There are a ton of services in the database. In Oracle Cloud. So starting with compute services, right? If you want to create dedicated machines, virtual machines, BareMetal machines, if you want to create networks, if you want to create custom images, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can create, right? So for example, if you want to create an instance, you just go here and you can create a new instance. And this would just be, you know, some version of a compute, right? So basically, you know, you want to create a compute engine. Do you want it to boot? Do you want it to boot an operating system? You can specify that kind of information. So very simple, right? Just to create a basic image of an operating system, right? If you want to do storage, we can create block volumes. We can create file systems. You can mount the file system. So generic usage. If you want to back up your database, you can create manual backup into these, you know, block volumes. So several services under storage. Under networking, if you want to create obviously a virtual cloud network, you can do that. But there's also you know, a load balancing service, right? So let's say you have a service or you have a service that's halfway here, half of it here, half of it in Europe, and you want to, you know, load balance it, or just across different data centers in the US, right? You can certainly use the load balancer to create, you know, manage how and where people connect to. There's also an inter-region balancer. This one's pretty cool. You can see what the current latency is between our different data centers. These are all our data centers. We have quite a few of them, and how long in milliseconds you know, basically a ping is running. So let's say that you're interested. Hey, I need to put some stuff in the US and I need to put some stuff in South America in the Brazil data center. How long is the ping? How long is the connectivity? A lot of customers do ask us this, right, as they're planning their deployments. We'll look at the databases in a minute. For under analytics, we have our analytics cloud, all our application analytics are in here, and all our data lake services, big data, data catalog, data flow, data integration and flow. These are for integrating external data into the database or into our other services. We have machine learning services that are not related to the database. These are just, for example, if you're running Python, if you're a data scientist and you want to run Python code to analyze data, you can do that here, right? And so on and so forth. Developer services. Here's Apex. We talked about low code development. Here's something interesting. It's called a SQL worksheet. This is basically SQL Developer hosted on our cloud, and you can just connect. You can connect to any database in our cloud or on your own data center and access them all from this cloud version of SQL Developer, right? So if you're familiar with that, you can run that here, and so on and so forth. I want to show you the marketplace. If you're not familiar with this, we actually have a lot of applications in our marketplace that you may choose to run. If you're an Oracle e-business suite customer and you want to run e-business suite in our cloud, you can just take this marketplace image and basically you can deploy it immediately, right? You say, hey, I want to deploy it, launch instance. You click the button, the next thing you know, you have an e-business suite cloud deployment running, right? So any application that's in our marketplace, you can deploy with click and run. And there's quite a few, right? So it's not just Oracle applications. There's a lot of third parties that are out here that you can choose. Okay, so a lot of stuff in our cloud, right? Not just the database. So having said that, let me go back to databases, right? So of course, Autonomous Database is our main service. We talked about the different workloads that you can have. If you've never seen an Autonomous Database being created, it's very quick. You give it a database name and so on. This is where we talked about the different workloads. So there's only one Autonomous Database, but if you know the kind of workload you're going to give it, hey, it's mostly data warehouse or transaction processing, or I'm going to be using a lot of JSON data, you can pick, right? So transaction processing, you can put it on shared infrastructure, which means there's going to be more than one user on the Exadata system this is hosted on, or you can have your own dedicated infrastructure. You say, look, I don't want any noisy neighbors. I'm a big customer. I want a full Exadata machine dedicated to me. You can put it on dedicated infrastructure. And then, you can pick the version of the database that you're running, how many CPUs you want to initially deploy. We talked about auto scaling, right? You can enable auto scaling, which says, hey, start with one, but if you need to grow it as it needs to grow, and then shrink it back after I'm done. How many terabytes you want to use. You can also use storage auto scaling. So your database just grows when it needs to, right? And then that's it. Let me just, I'll take this and then I'll come back and we'll look at it. Okay, so choose network access, right? If you're an existing customer and you have licenses, you can bring your own licenses. That really makes the service very inexpensive. Or you can say full license, right? License included, and that's it. So create Autonomous Database. And you'll see this is being created. I already have one that's created. So that's the one that we're creating in here, but I'll show you around this one real quick. So there were several questions. The first one was, how do I do performance management? Performance Hub is included in here. You're probably familiar with other tools, ADDM, SQL monitoring, right? Blocking sessions. Unfortunately, I should have run some queries to show you some of this because there's nothing really that I've run in this database lately. But if you're familiar with ADDM, or you just want to look at specific SQL, you can do all of that here. Ash Analytics, if you're familiar with Ash Analytics, that's all included here for free, and you can use that for database monitoring, right? There's a whole bunch of different types of reports that you can create and look at. You can do it by hour, week, custom, specific time of the day. So that's all included in here in Autonomous Database. Okay, so so let's see if how we're doing. So remember the database I was creating. So that's already created. So I have a database in here already now, the one I just created. You can scale this manually if you want to. You can start, stop the database, rename it, all this other stuff, which is fine. Notice here, Autonomous Data Guard, right? So this database I just created is a single instance. I don't have Autonomous Data Guard enabled. I'm going to go back to my other database and show you in a minute. Also, I have no backups, right? I just created a database. So nothing really to see there. If I go back to the database I created a while ago, and I look at the backups, you're going to see that I have 79 backups. We keep roughly 3 months worth of backups. These are done daily. Once a week is a full backup. Every other day it's an incremental backup. You can also create a manual backup if you want to back up more than once a day, or you want to back up to your own object store, you can always do that. You can, from a backup, there's two things you can do. You can restore your database, or you can create a clone, which is really cool, because then you can just create a second database with a whole, you can either create a full clone or a refreshable clone, if you're familiar with those concepts in Oracle, or you can just create a metadata clone, which says, hey, just create the objects, but don't load the data. Okay, so I see that we're running very short on time. I very quickly want to show you also some of the other ones. So we have BareMetal, VM, and Exadata. So somebody asked about these, BareMetal or not. This service is available like any other service, right? If you want to create a non-autonomous database, you can create a virtual machine, which is a DBCS machine. You can create a BareMetal instance, or you can use it on Exadata. The advantages of using DBCS, right, are that you can actually select the version of the database. So if you're on Oracle 11, we go back as far as Oracle 11, and we go to specific patch sets. So if you're trying to come in from existing on-prem system and you're on 12.102 and you want to be on that specific patch set, you can pick that image and deploy it on DBCS. With autonomous database, of course, we're going to be on the latest and greatest patch set for 19C, usually 19C or 21C are the instances we're running over there. So I know I'm basically out of time. So this is a very brief demo of our Cloud Console and our database services. Are there any questions left?
It looks like we have just a couple more. There's one that asked, why is the file storage service high cost compared to block volume and object storage?
Well, because file storage is a full file system, right? Versus block volume and object store, which is really just for like a database backup, right? We expect that file storage will get used a lot, and you want fast storage access to that data, right? It's a file system versus a backup, which is, take the backup, and if I need to restore it, I'll restore from it. Right?
Yeah. And then one more saying, after creation, can you reconfigure autonomous database from JSON to transactional? Yes, you can. As a matter of fact, you can change your workload type. As a matter of fact, so the JSON service is a very low cost service because it's meant to just be a JSON specific workload. But you can update, you can change, update license type or service type. Right, you can go from one to the other, and then you would be switched over. Yes. And then one more just popped up. Is there any minimum or pre-requirement to take manual database backups in autonomous database? You have to create an object store, so you would have to buy a minimum of object store storage, which is big enough to manage your backup on your database. Got it. So, and then one more just popped up. Once I've created my autonomous database, how can I create a connection through Oracle Developer DB tool? Through SQL Developer? I think that's what they must mean. Yeah. So what you do is you go into DB connection, and there's called a wallet. So I assume that you're talking about a SQL Developer tool installed on your machine. So you need to download this wallet. This is well documented here. You download the wallet, and then the wallet has a connect string that you would put into your SQL Developer connection. I do want to show you very quickly. Let me just take 1 minute for those of you that want to hang around. SQL Developer, I mentioned, is included in here. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's included in Autonomous Database, but I just want to show you SQL. Here, by the way, is Oracle Data Integrator and all the other stuff I talked about, JSON management. But SQL Developer is included in Autonomous, so you don't need to run the on-prem version anymore if you don't want to. You can just run the included version that's in there. Got it. And then one more saying that if we use database from Oracle and an application in Azure, in the case of switchover and failover database, do we need to reconfigure the application?
You do not, because it's just like we use a fast failover or FAN, if you're familiar with that, with those concepts from on-prem. Your database, your application connects to a service, right? So the surviving node, the surviving database, so the backup database assumes that service name when there's a switchover. So not as long as you write your application to use that service, yeah.
Awesome, thanks. So I think that is all the questions we have so far. So we can hand it back to Kenna to close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to launch one final poll, just a little feedback poll that we like to ask every time. And thank you so much, Uma and Brandon, for this 6-session series. Thank you, Eugenio, for joining us on this last one as our special guest and doing some deep dives into database. I'm going to drop some links in chat, which I think we maybe didn't get to in the slides, but since I have them already, I will do that, and some resources. And everybody should get those with the replay and everything as well. So if you've attended, you'll be able to find these resources later along with the replay. So feel free to give us your feedback on that poll. Check out future events that we have coming up. We're going to be running this series again as well. So if it was helpful to you and you want to pass it along to other folks, this will be a regular series moving forward as well. So thanks everybody for your time and have a great rest of your day.